Hello, it is time for another video. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to deal with her all week, and now here she is again. And all I can say to that is, well, you clicked on the link, so whose fault is that? We are going to be talking now about period 6, which is going to go from 1865 to 1898. This one should be relatively short. Of course, promises. Who knows how we're going to go. But let's go ahead and dive right in and get started on this. And hopefully you can learn something and know what you need to know for the exam that you're going to be taking on all of this. So here we go, period 6. Basically, period 6 is going to start with another assassination. It's going to be the second assassination of a president when Garfield will be assassinated. That's the president, not the cat. Garfield's going to be assassinated due to this idea of political patronage. He had a supporter who believed he should have gotten a job in the government after Garfield didn't get elected. It didn't happen, so he took it upon himself to assassinate Garfield. That'll show him. What ends up happening, though, is this is going to lead to civil service reform in our country. And the Pendleton Act will be passed in 1884. And with the Pendleton Act, basically what happens is we see the spoils system come to an end in our country, and we see a new way of hiring government officials where like civil service tests are going to be required now before you can get a job. Also during the 1880s, we're going to see the Chinese Exclusion Act is going to be passed. That's going to be 1882, in which we start basically prohibiting Chinese immigration coming into our country. What we're finding throughout the country, especially in the West, is a lot of racism and xenophobia and stuff like that with regards to the Chinese. So the government's just going to pass a law ending that immigration. Now I want to take a step back, if you will allow me to do that. What I want to talk about next, I want to go back to the 1860s because that's going to set up the next big thing that happened in period 5. I didn't really talk about it when we were in period 4, but what I want to hit on, I guess period 5, is the fact that during the 1860s, 3 key laws were passed under Lincoln. He's able to pass these laws primarily because of the all Republican Congress and the fact that the southern states are not part of the voting element at that point. The first law he's going to pass is the Pacific Railway Act, and that's going to set a northern route for the Transcontinental Railroad, and they're going to start building that right away. And quite honestly, tie that back to the last slide, that's what's going to draw a lot of the Chinese immigrants into our country, because they're actually going to build for the Central Pacific Railroad and build the Transcontinental Railroad from the west to the east, while you have primarily the Irish building from the east and the west on the Union Pacific Railroad. The next act I want to talk about is the Homestead Act of 1862. This is going to offer a certain amount of acreage to number of families to move out west, and all they have to do is farm it and maintain it, and after I believe 5 years they own that land outright. The third act I want to talk about is the Morrill Land Grant Act. This is that's going to lead to the development of colleges throughout the West. I mean, a lot of you guys are planning on going to A&M. You can thank the Morrill Land Grant Act for that. But the reason why I wanted to point that out is because what happens in the 1880s deals directly with what happened in the 1860s. And that's with regards to the Native Americans. While we're fighting in the Civil War, while we're fighting with Reconstruction and trying to rebuild our country, there are Indian wars going on in the West. We have basically, our military was dead or tasked with not only fighting in the Civil War, but fighting Indian wars in the West. And these are going to come to a head in the 1880s. 1887, the Dawes Act is going to be passed. And this is our last attempt at assimilation of the Native Americans, bringing them into the white fold, if you will. The Carlisle schools started to start educating young Native Americans, training them the white way to live, if you will. But the battles still go on. You have several key battles that you might want to be aware of. The Sand Creek Massacre with Chivington at the helm, and then Wounded Knee. Wounded Knee is important. What makes that an important battle is that's the last battle of the Indian Wars. And the question might be, well, why all these wars? Why now? And a lot of it goes back to those laws that were passed in the 1860s. with the Transcontinental Railroad, with the Dawes Act, expansion and manifest destiny is exploding. And we are moving into Indian territory, and basically they're going to be fighting for their territory, so that's going to push for more conflicts between us and the Native Americans. Other thing that goes on during the 1880s is the rise of immigration. This is going to be the second wave of immigration coming to our country, the new immigrants, as compared to the old immigrants that were in the early 1800s. When we talk about the old immigrants, they primarily came from Western Europe. But these new immigrants are coming from South and Eastern Europe. And so that's going to lead to a problem, going down the line when we get into the next time period, especially in the 1920s, with the Second Red Scare. So, but that wave of immigration is going to start building during the 1880s and really take off once we go into the next century, into the 1900s. We're going to go into the Gilded Ages. This time period is normally referred to as the Gilded Age. And the one thing about the Gilded Age is the presidencies. I have 9 different presidents up there, going all the way from Andrew Johnson through William McKinley. And these are often referred to as the forgotten presidents because most of them, with the exception of Grant, only served 1 term in office. They come and go, and they're just not able to get things done. So that's why, we don't spend a lot of time on these guys, because they just didn't accomplish much during their presidencies. I'm trying to think of, make sure I got everything here. When we go into the Gilded Age, 3 big things you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of the economic reforms that will be passed, the political reforms, as well as the labor reforms. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my PowerPoint over here and trying to talk to you guys too. Let me just do this so I can focus on both of you guys at the same time. So the Gilded Age, basically what we see in the late 1880s going into the 1890s is farmers are going to start standing up and fighting for their rights and fighting for basically relief from the struggles they're going through. And this is when you're going to see the Grange start up, and the Farmers Alliance is going to start up. And what that's going to do is that's going to basically morph into the Populist Party. And you really make sure you know the platform of the Populist Party. They're going to be fighting for things like bimetallism. That's the key word you need to know, the bimetallism. Not only having a gold standard, but having a silver standard as well. And during this time, we are going to go through some economic crises. Settlement houses are going to spring up during this time. So make sure you know about Jane Hall and the settlement houses. And those are also going to become predominant during the next time period, which is the Progressive Era. So be aware of all this. The Gilded Age is what's going to be the lead-in to the Progressive Era. It's generally considered a shorter time period. A lot of people just consider it going from 1890 to 1900. But it does set us up for the Progressive Era. One of the main reasons why is we're going to see a lot of corruption and stuff during this time. Now, William Jennings Bryan, that's a name you need to know with regards to the Gilded Age. He is going to run for president in 1896 against McKinley. And the most important thing you need to know about William Jennings Bryan, know about his Cross of Gold speech. When he refers to his Cross of Gold, he is arguing for bimetallism. So make sure you know about William Jennings Bryan during the Gilded Age. Urbanization is going to play a huge role during this time period. We are going to see the shift in our populations from rural society to urban society. And a lot of it's going in because of the Second Industrial Revolution. We have factories building up. Cities are going to be building up because of this influx of huge people. I've already talked about the new wave of immigrants that are coming in, and they're going right to the cities. All of this is going to lead to, basically the type of lifestyle that we have in the cities. We're going to see tenement houses rising up. We're going to see child labor being used in the factories. But the big thing is our entire population is shifting to these cities. One reason they're able to shift there is because of the factory that's going on. We have the rise of capitalists during the Gilded Age. People like John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller had dealt with oil, Standard Oil Company. Cornelius Vanderbilt and the railroads are going to take off. Carnegie with steel. And then the financier J.P. Morgan, who is not only going to help us get out of an economic crisis later in the century, but he is actually going to take Carnegie's steel and turn that into what is present day U.S. steel. Now, a lot of people call these guys capitalists. Some of them call them robber barons. I guess it depends on what side of the coin you're on. If you're benefiting from these, the capitalist title is perfect. But if you are oppressed because of factory conditions and stuff like that, you're going to call them robber barons because you see them as making a lot of money off the backs of hardworking Americans. During the Gilded Age, we're also going to see the rise of unions coming out. We talked about the Knights of Labor. We talked about the AFL being developed during this time. Also be aware of some of the different the homestead strike and stuff like that. So just look at the relationship between these entrepreneurs, if you were, or capitalists or robber barons, however you want to refer to them, and the rise of unions during the Gilded Age. Also know about how they structured their business. There's two types of business models that were created during the Gilded Age. One is called horizontal integration, the other vertical integration. Horizontal integration basically means you own every piece of one part of the manufacturing system. For instance, J.D. Rockefeller, what he had was he owned all the oil refineries. And so that allowed him to build a monopoly on the oil refineries. Now compare that with vertical integration and Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie had owned every single level of production with regards to steel, from production to delivery. He owned every single step. So that's called vertical integration. Make sure you know the difference between all of those. Now, with all this, with the life in the cities, with the child labor, with the life of, the working conditions in the factories, the living conditions in the tenement homes and stuff like that, you had a group of artists, a group of authors who came out known as muckrakers, and they're going to basically expose life in the Gilded Age. Obviously, the one you guys always remember is Upton Sinclair in the book The Jungle, where he exposes the meatpacking industry and all the disgusting stuff that was going on in those factories. But you also had Ida Tarbell talking about Standard Oil and some of the I guess the scandals that happened with that. Jacob Riis, How the Other Half Lives, all the photos he put out there and putting a face to the life. So make sure you know all these guys, because these muckrakers are going to lead to reform during the progressive era, the next time we're going to talk about. The last thing I want to talk about during the Gilded Age is the Supreme Court. And the big ruling in the Supreme Court was in 1896, the ruling of Plessy versus Ferguson. Now, Plessy versus Ferguson is basically where we talked about separate but equal. The court ruled that you could segregate people by race as long as everyone has equal opportunities or equal facilities. Now, I have this up there in line with the Dred Scott case in 1857 and the Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. I think the three of these cases kind of set up well together for some synthesis if you want to talk about basically the rights of African Americans in our country over time. I mean, in 1857, African Americans it was declared they couldn't even be citizens of our country. Well, by 1896, they're citizens, but they're not going to have the same rights. I mean, we still have Jim Crow down in the South with the black codes, and we have a court saying that it's okay to separate the races. And, the court did say as long as they have equal facilities, but we know the truth. They didn't have equal facilities. And this separate but equal is going to go on for over 50 years until 1954 in Brown v. Board of Education, where the court ruled you cannot have separate but equal because that just doesn't exist. So at that point, schools needed to be segregated. So those three cases are a great way to synthesize if you get the opportunity in your essays. All right, that's it for period 6. Coming up is a huge period, period 7, 1890 to 1945. That's going to cover, guys, everything from the Progressive Era, World War One, the Roaring Twenties. What else? The Great Depression, the New Deal, World War Two, and the beginning of the Cold War. So that's going to be a big topic. That's going to be a little bit longer. So be prepared for that one. I hope your studying's going well. I hope you're having a great day. Again, if you ever have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll do what I can to help you out. Otherwise, have a good one, and we'll see you soon in period 7. Bye-bye.